So I thought since last week we watched Captain Video on the famous DuMont network, the forgotten network, so I found another show from the DuMont network. So if anyone has just somehow stumbled across this and hasn't heard our previous episode, I think you should go back and listen to that for the tragic tale of DuMont. But the long story short is, in the early days, it was one of the big networks like NBC and CBS. Went out of business in the mid-50s, and then in the 70s, they filled 3 garbage trucks full of DuMont shows and dumped them in the East River. We're like, fuck you, planet Earth. It's crazy, too, because I was just down the street talking to Dad, and I told him that story about dumping all the DuMont shows in the river. And he's like, man, I never even heard of the DuMont network. And I feel like we're a family of, we know a lot of trivia knowledge. We got a lot of random crap that we know, but none of us had ever heard of the DuMont network.
But got to remember now, this was pre-TV for for everybody.
Yeah.
Very few people would have had TV in the late 1940s and the early 1950s. DuMont was American from Philadelphia. Where was it from?
I'm somewhere in the East Coast, but maybe Chicago.
Maybe
I think the show we're watching today was filmed in Chicago, somewhere around there anyway.
Someplace like that.
Yeah.
And you got to, in Canada, if anybody who did it, when we didn't have TVs until 1952, isn't it? Then CBC started, and that was all you could get.
Still, though, I'm surprised just because I guess that's the weird thing about trivia, right? Is it seems like you know everything until you don't know something.
You don't know anything.
Like whenever I do music trivia in Toronto, before COVID, when you could do that, like at a bar, it's like, hey, I'm the music guy. I know all about music until a Shania Twain question happens, and then I don't know.
DuMont would probably have been known to people like Canadians who lived on the border.
Yeah, maybe.
But if you didn't have a TV, you wouldn't have known about them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's called the Forgotten Network for a reason, I guess.
And CBS and NBC, we only know them because they have survived.
Right.
If they had died out in the early years of TV, how many people would have known about them? Probably nobody.
But I guess I still think it's just surprising though for a whole network to go, because I know Philo T. Farnsworth is the guy who invented the TV. Why do I know that? But I never heard of the DuMont network.
Yeah, but think about early radio too. Early TV would be very much like early radio. Oh Brother, Wherefore Art Thou? That right. Movie, which showed about all those old radio stations that were out in the desert, picking up aerial waves. Well, those didn't last any length of time at all. And they were just kind of these like pirate radio stations that were just operating on the fringe. A station like DuMont would have been maybe a little higher class in TV than that, but probably very similar. And if you checked it out, I bet there were all kinds of those little TV stations all over the place too.
Yeah, well, I think that's what's ironic about DuMont is it wasn't small enough. I know about public access TV, I know about UHF stations. I just don't know about DuMont because it was a real network and then it went away. So who needs to know about it? We have the other networks that still exist,
But if it had the right management and the right advertising, commercials, it could have been an NBC or a CBS possibly.
Yeah, that's one of those things too that's kind of it's weird is I think I'm way more a fan of the capitalist system than most of my friends and stuff are. I really think it gets a bad rap. There's a lot of good stuff about how the North American system works, but you can't deny that there's a certain roll of the dice to it, of you have to be so lucky to be a network that actually made it, it's almost weirder that the other networks actually still are around.
I have to agree. Right place, right time, and one hell of a lot of luck.
Yeah.
Probably is what made some of them survive, and others just fell by the wayside.
Or they always say the average millionaire or whatever, has gone bankrupt multiple times before something finally worked. So, DuMont's just the one that went bankrupt. If you look at the spectrum of TV, they're the ones that didn't make it. But anyway, so yeah, there's not a ton of DuMont shows in general. This one, there's not a lot of information about. It's called They Stand Accused, which is quite a name.
They Stand Accused. So
it's a courtroom show. It was broadcast off and on from 1949 until 1954. And I think this says a lot about DuMont, that it was described as one of the network's more enduring shows. They Stand Accused was canceled in 1954.
Oh, I know why I'm familiar with They Stand Accused. I'm not. When we were going through those TV things,
Yeah.
going through the years of TV, They Stand Accused was one of them, and we commented on it and said, gee, I wonder what that's all about. That sounds kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
That is exactly why it was on my
That's
list.
exactly. I'm thinking, They Stand Accused. Why do I know that? But I don't know it.
Yeah, it's just because it was a funny sounding name.
It was one that caught our interest.
So dramatic. So the only description I've got is that it was a courtroom presided over by attorney Charles Johnson, was broadcast live from Chicago. Jurors were chosen from the studio audience, and at least 2 episodes survive. So we have one of the 2.
Maybe it's the precursor to Judge Judy.
Yeah, I don't know how, like how serious it's going to be, or what's the deal, or like the People's Court, or like, what is this going to be? I guess the only thing then before, because there's nothing else to say about it, that's all I know, is if I remember right, didn't you have a brief stint doing criminal law stuff? Did you ever do this, going to court and doing that whole?
I went to court a few times, yeah. Didn't interest me to play the games with all those.
I assume it wasn't like, because you were always a big fan of like Rumpole of the Bailey and stuff.
Big time. Oh, yeah, he's my hero.
But
even as a kid, Perry Mason. Perry Mason was my idol. If I was going to be anything in life, it would be like Perry Mason. I'd be a lawyer.
So I assume in real life it just wasn't like TV. None of this, like, you can't handle the truth.
No, it's not nearly as exciting.
Just a lot of to do upon
Yawn.
circumstance. How, well, I guess if you've got the American system, which is Perry Mason, and you got the British system, which is Rumpole wearing his powdered wig, where does Canada fall? Is it just some amalgam of the two?
Yeah, we'd be in between. Nowhere near as dramatic as anything you'd ever see on TV or in the movies.
Cool. All right. Well, anyway, and this one, it's longer. I'm getting so comfortable with these half-hour shows. This one is the whole hour.
Okay.
So here's hoping that one of the remaining 2 episodes of They Stand Accused is a real barn burner. I guess we'll see. Oh yeah, this one's real rough. This is very poor quality, but hey, you can't. What can you do? DuMont.
Now, because a man named Roberts isn't dead the way everybody said he was, Johnny's future hangs in the balance. His mother, Mary. This child. Thank you very much for your efforts here. The court stands adjourned.
One more lanolin plus. So what is the point? I don't know anything about court stuff. What's the point of a jury if the judge can just be like, nah?
Normally you can't do that. No. If you are able to choose judge and jury or judge alone, then the judge can't. The judge can't put aside the juries.
They Stand Accused has originated live from Chicago through the facilities of station WGN-TV in association with the DuMont Television Network. This is the DuMont Television Network.
Not for long, it ain't. So,
Well, for early television, it's pretty damn good. It was dry, rather boring throughout for an hour. If they could have tightened that up and put it in half an hour, it would have been better.
It could have been half hour for sure.
However, if they want to show it as a realistic courtroom setting, that's what it's like. They did it.
Yeah, I think the only thing that, because it was just, domestic drama type courtroom thing, it was, like surprisingly good job being naturalistic with the courtroom people, all of the judges and the,
Yes,
whatever.
and screwing up names and shuffling papers around and...
and like not really completely invested because it's just their day job. They just do this all the
just
time.
another case.
So yeah, they did a good job there. It is just that obviously every week they bring in different actors to be the different, whatever the different cases. And yeah, those people are
To
classic.
be the accused.
Classic 1950s. I just got out of fucking NYU or Juilliard or whatever, and I'm an actor. Look at my Gomez mustache, my Gomez Adams mustache. Yeah, like it was very unnatural the way they acted, where it's just like, here's my whole character biography. Here's like, oh yeah, I went to this and did that. And it's funny because one of the, what are they, the lawyers? I can't remember
The
lawyers.
prosecutor and the defense and the prosecutor.
One of them brought up at one point, like, I would just like an answer. I don't want a whole story. But it's no, he got a whole story. Everybody had their story. Like they just went through
They had
every.
to drag it out for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess it was just basically, I mean, it was an interesting sort of little, it was okay. It's just like
Yeah, the little plot development was interesting. Gal marries Guy. He goes off to war. He is reported dead after the war, but he's in a prisoner of war camp. She waits 15 months. She marries the boy next door that she had always known. They have a baby. Then the other husband comes back about 5 years later, and the second marriage is annulled. And they seem to be getting on quite amicably with, she's gone back to husband number one. She has child with her, but they seem to share the child, she and the second husband. But then all of a sudden, husband number one gets a job in Rome and wants to take the whole family off to Rome, and they really didn't tell husband number two. That is, that they were going to take his child to Rome. And all of a sudden, he finds out, and he goes over and confronts him about it, and there's fisticuffs and all this business.
Isn't it true that you went in with vengeance in your heart?
And he takes the child, home to his house, where there's just him and his mum.
Well, I love that vengeance thing, because he's like, I didn't go over there with feelings of anger and resentment, but perhaps they did become that.
So then the basis of the trial is, should the child go with husband number one and his mother, or stay with his father in the United States of America? And they really pushed that country. You
did bring up a good point, because it was like, it's funny to me that they acted like moving to Rome is like the craziest thing in the world, but you did bring up like, they were on the other side of the war. Right. I'm like, right.
And we are talking only 5 or 6 years later.
Right.
And when whichever lawyer it was, says, do you feel that Rome is a safe place to be? And you said, well, gee, why wouldn't it be? But then when you think about that, it is only 5 or 6 years after the end of the war, of World War II. And, they were run by a dictator.
Yeah, I guess it's true. Like I think of just like cappuccinos and bullshit.
Yeah. But really, when you think of it, and this man had just come out of a prisoner of war camp, over there. So in 1947, I think they said it was, 47, 48. So obviously, even after World War II ended, there were people still incarcerated over there for a few years after. So you got to kind of look at it from that time and place. Like we always say, you got to look at it in that time and place. But I was surprised that, it didn't surprise me that the jury found for the mother. Because again, in today's day, now, that would never have happened if you have an interested father. But in 1950, mothers stayed at home. Mothers didn't work. They were there for their children, for their husbands. They cooked and cleaned and obviously watched They Stand Accused in the afternoon. But that was their job in life, to be a domestic and take care of the baby or the son.
And that was a pretty good point that the one guy brought up, one of the lawyers, of just like... isn't it better for this kid to be with the mom? Because if we send the kid with the dad's got to go to work, and then the grandma has to raise the kid. Like, why bother? Just let the kid be with the mom, even if it is in the horrible nightmare world that is Rome, Italy.
So we're kind of getting the impression that and then the judge, of course, overturned their decision, which was very unusual.
Yeah, that was weird.
And allowed custody to the father of the child.
Strangely pointless, because it's a scripted show. They could just have 2 different scripts.
However,
2 endings.
It was interesting in that this is 1950, and yet they were considering the interests of the father in 1950.
Right.
I wasn't expecting that. I thought, they'll just give that to the mother because that's just how it was in those days.
And I guess it did an okay job of it was generally kind of low stakes and kind of domestic and boring, but still tangled up enough that at least it gave you some weird stuff to consider. Like, they made a pretty good case for both sides or whatever. It is like, I think you said, it could have been half an hour. I think if this was half an hour, it'd be a pretty good show.
Yeah,
it's just
half an hour, they could have tightened it right up, and it could have been a really interesting show.
Right.
Not that it wasn't interesting, it was, but it dragged at points. But if they're trying to show a realistic courtroom type setting, they are boring. They do drag. People do screw up and fumble over their words and shuffle papers around and ask for delays and all this business. So if that's what they were trying to accomplish, they did it, and they did a really good job of it.
Yeah, that's where I do kind of wish I could find a little more information about this show, because presumably, if it's not the first courtroom show, it's got to be among the first. It might be the first. So, I mean, yeah, it's a good idea. They did a good job with
And it'd be
that.
kind of interesting to see other ones. I mean, this was a domestic family stuff, which is always kind of very emotional.
Yeah.
Anyway, it would be interesting to see one that was more maybe a criminal element. Is like when they say they stand accused. Well, in this show, like, who was the accused?
Yeah.
You know, it's not like somebody.
They stand accused of bizarre circumstances.
Yeah, or family domesticity. I think that there must be other shows where there really is an accused, and is he guilty or is he innocent? There's really no guilt or innocence in this thing.
Didn't you say, too, this was a reason why you guys moved more into real estate law and stuff? Because this kind of family law pablum is just like, you just get tired of hearing everyone's squabbles?
And there's never any resolution. And even in this show, that gave you a perfect example of it. There was no definite cut and dried answer to this thing. Even the judge, when he overturned the jury, says, now, but we will readdress this. When Mrs. comes back from Rome, she will have full access to the child, and we will certainly readdress this issue of custody that we have granted to the father.
Even that seemed like a little bit of a skip forward, where I think at that point the next step would be, do you want to reconsider moving to Rome? You could still just not move to Rome. You don't have to.
Yeah.
So now that you know you're going to lose your kid, presumably they're just not going to move to Rome. They'll sort out something in America. Yeah, so anyway. But yeah, it's like I love though that the judge was like, interesting verdict, jury, but I flipped a coin in my chambers, and yeah, because who cares?
Yeah,
Who cares
I
who
can't
wins?
agree with you.
Yeah.
So I'm deciding differently, and what I say goes.
So I guess the other thing about this is it still had the commercials baked in, because it was one of these where the whole episode is sponsored by one company, Lanolin skin products that I'd never heard of before.
Lanolin.
And it was all that. And yeah, it really makes it clear, like watching the show, it's not clear who the demographic was, but watching the commercials, it's like, oh yeah, this is aimed at women, because it's all beauty products and lipstick and perfume and skin stuff.
And not necessarily a working woman.
Right.
It's aimed at homemakers, domestic types, because it's to look good for your man. Try the test where you put lanolin on one side of your face and you don't put it on the other, and let your man have the feel of your face to see which he feels is best.
The one that really cracked me up, though, is like the second commercial was a cowboy. So I'm like, okay, I guess this is where they're going for the man ad. But nope, because it wasn't a cowboy. He's like, well, I must have played a cowboy in at least 100 movies. And, oh, boy, the splinters and dust, and, like, I needed a hand cream. And it's like, okay, that's also the female version of a cowboy spokesman. Like, no dude would respond to all that nonsense. He'd want to hear, like, I'm out there trussing up cows and stuff, and ooh, doggy. But no, this guy's like, I'm an actor. I play a handsome cowboy.
But the other one was the ad with the painter.
Yeah, he's like painting a portrait
He's
of a lady.
painting a portrait of this lady who has dry skin. But they have to get a few little catty remarks in about Mrs. So-and-so, who we painted last week, who has greasy skin.
Yeah. Or even just like, yes, of course I realize that you have crow's feet in real life, and yes, I've painted them out, but you could also do this in real life with a lanolin. You don't need to walk around being such an ugly hag. It's basically what they're saying.
God.
So anyway, yeah, so they stand accused, the DuMont network.
But it didn't have, there's a lot of those early shows have a whole lot of cornball stuff in them.
Right.
This didn't really have cornball stuff.
But I guess my favorite part of it was just because it was a live show and it was a whole hour, like, it was just kind of funny near the start where the guy said Fred instead of Tom for the two husbands. But by the end, they were like, and then Fred wasn't even Tom's wife. Like, just saying things that don't even make sense.
Yeah.
They're like, hurry, let's get to the end.
And
I
little
can't.
Tommy, Johnny.
Yeah, I can't remember anyone's name anymore. I don't care. Just like roll the Lanolin ad. Like, they made so many mistakes. The other thing too, yeah, is because you've got the actors, you know, like the guy who was in the concentration camp especially had the I'm a transatlantic actor and whatever. But the people that played the courtroom dudes, you know, it was filmed in Chicago, and man, they were Chicago. Tom Chalmers, Like Tam. And we said Tam.
Yeah.
Because like that's such a strong accent. That's literally a different name. His name's not Tam. His name is Tom.